our honored guest speaker, Yang Berusaha, Professor Dr. Abdul Rahman, Vice President of Research, Development, Commercialization and Consultancy, Dr. Rahman, Head of Institute of Social and Economic Research at UTAR, Tunku Abdul Rahman, University of Management and Technology, Dr. Chin Yi Man, Chairperson of Tunku Center for Social and Policy Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, students and staff, thank you all for gracing us with your presence today. A very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to today's event. Malaysia is at a crossroads, and a lot of people around the world are excited to see where we are heading to next. Today, we are very privileged to listen to the unique perspective of our honorable guest, Mr. Khairy Jamaluddin, as he shares where Malaysia is going towards and Malaysia's outlook by 2050. My name is Jasindra Selvarajan, and I will be your MC for this event. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Chin Yi Man, Chairperson of Tunku Center for Social and Policy Studies, for a welcoming speech.
Very good afternoon to Mr. Khairy, founder of the center, Associate Senior Fellow of ISIS Singapore, Keluar Sekejap host, and of course our prominent political figure in Malaysia. Yang Berusaha, Professor Dr. UTAR Vice President, Research, Development and Commercialization. Yang berbahagia Datin Paduka Tan Siok Chu, our Tunku Center for Social Policy Studies Steering Committee member, Dr. Yap Hon Lun, Institute of Socio-Economic Research, UTAR, fellow colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of UTAR and Tunku Center for Social and Policy Studies, I would like to extend our warmest welcome to Mr. Khairy. We sincerely thank you for agreeing to spend some time with us and share your views on an important topic: what will Malaysia be in 2050? Ladies and gentlemen, this year we are celebrating our country's 67th independence anniversary. We have achieved significant progress. Our population has increased from 10.55 million 50 years ago to 34 million now. Economically, we are now recognized as an upper middle income country, and we are aiming to be a developed country by 2030. Our GDP has increased nearly tenfold compared to our GDP in 1970. And if you look at our average lifespan, life expectancy had also increased. According to data from the World Bank, in 1960, the average life expectancy in Malaysia was 63.11 years. Now, on average, Malaysians can expect to live up to 74.88 years. So we have progressed a lot. Even so, there is still much room for improvement. Many challenges await resolution. In recent years, as all of us know, Malaysia's political landscape has been described as unstable. Global economic turmoil and volatile international politics are affecting our country. Food prices have increased, particularly in the past few years. Other costs of living have also increased. These conditions have to some extent brought hardship to Malaysians. Given this background, so we wonder what Malaysia's landscape will look like in 2050. We are delighted to have with us today Mr. Khairy. We are certain his views on Malaysia in 2050 will provide us with valuable insights. I believe all of us in this lecture theatre today are eagerly awaiting his speech. So with that, I would like to thank again Mr. Khairy for agreeing to come here and share your thoughts on this important topic. Thank you.
Please remain at the front for now. We would like to start off today's event with a special moment to honor our guest lecturer, Mr. Khairy Jamaluddin, with a token of appreciation. I would like to invite Mr. Khairy Jamaluddin to the front, accompanied by Professor Faiz and Datin Paduka Tan Siok Chu, to present a token of appreciation. request Professor Faiz, as well as Mr. Khairy to remain at the front, and I would like to invite our honourable guests, Dr. Jamaluddin, as well as Dr. to join us for today's We would also like to have a group photo taking session along with the audience. I would like to request our guests to please take their respective seats as we will be taking the picture seated. At this point, I would like to invite Dr. to join us as the moderator for the rest of the event.
Thank you. So I'm Tunku, the Research Fellow of Tunku Center for Social and Policy Studies. I'm your moderator for today's lecture series. Again, thank you very much to Mr. Khairy Jamaluddin, our special guest lecturer today. I believe KJ is someone that I don't have to introduce much, but let me just give you a brief background of him for everyone's benefit. KJ most recently served as the Minister of Health Malaysia, who has played a significant role in fighting COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to that, he was the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation and Minister of Youth and Sports. And I'm glad to have the privilege of working under his leadership as his special officer during this time. Thank you, Chief. And now, KJ is a well-known public speaker and commentator on political and economic issues in his Malaysia #1 podcast, Keluar Sekejap. Without further ado, let us welcome Mr. Khairy Jamaluddin for his lecture.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Yang bahagia Datuk Paduka Tan Sok Chu, Profesor Dr. Faiz bin Rahman, UTAR Vice President, Associate Professor Dr. Chin Iman, Chairperson of the Tunku Center for Social and Policy Studies, Dr. Yap, Mr. Lee, UTAR staff and students, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank UTAR for inviting me this afternoon to speak to all of you, share some of my views about the future of our country, and perhaps try to answer some of the, I'm sure, tough questions that you will ask me in the Q&A session later. I won't speak for very long. I just want to outline what I think are the challenges over the next 25 years or so. It's always very difficult to gaze into a crystal ball as though you're looking into the future. If you think about 2050, that's roughly a quarter of a century, 25 years into the future. Now, most of you, all of you, were around and probably aware 25 years ago. That was 2000. Now, if you cast yourself back to 2000, could you imagine that the world was the way it is today? Could you imagine that Malaysia was the way it is today? In the year 2000, 9/11 had not happened yet. In the year 2000, Dr. Mahathir was still the Prime Minister. He became Prime Minister again in 2018, of course. And the world was a very, very different place. It was a unipolar world. The ascendancy of the American hegemonic world order was probably at its peak before being punctuated by both 9/11 and later the global financial crisis. Malaysia was emerging in 2000 from a severe financial crisis that had rocked our country in 1997. We were also emerging from a political crisis that shook the foundations of our political system in 1998. And so many things have changed since 2000. The iPhone didn't even exist, but so many things stayed the same. Characters from 2000 are still dominating our politics, for instance. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir, as I said. So in many ways, things have changed, and in many ways, things have really stayed the same. So what I'm trying to say is that it's extremely difficult to try to predict with any level of certainty what might occur over the next 25 years. What you can try to do is try to understand some of the big shifts, some of the moving parts, not just in Malaysia, but also in the context of the world, and try to understand how we can best prepare for this. When I was in government, we used to call this future-proofing. Of course, some companies do this in terms of trying to simulate what might happen in the future in order for companies to ensure that there's business continuity, that the companies are able to invest in changes, whether it's in technology, whether it's in sectors, whether it's in resources, whether it's in the general macroeconomic and geopolitical shifts of their time. But countries also have to future-proof themselves, because it takes a long time for a country to course correct and adjust in order to meet the challenges of the future. What do I mean? A country is not like a speedboat. If you go into a speedboat, it's very quick to change direction. A country is more like an oil tanker or big passenger ship, cruise ship. If it changes course, it needs a lot of time. So you can imagine a speedboat is very adept at changing course very quickly. But for a country to change course in terms of its economic trajectory, in terms of the sectors that it feels strongly about, in terms of meeting the future challenges, which I'll speak about later, it needs time, it needs resources. If you're talking about the future workforce for Malaysia, that can't happen overnight. It cannot happen in the span of 2 to 3 years. Think about yourselves. The gestation period it took for you to come to UTAR was not 2 to 3 years. It was in fact more than a decade, 12 years plus, for you to become the product that you are here, and that's not even the end product. The end product is never there, because we believe in lifelong upskilling and learning. I also am not the end product. So you can imagine that when you talk about workforce, it takes a decade or so to make that shift, a serious shift. You can make shifts around the margins, but for there to be a fundamental shift of your workforce, it takes time. When it comes to resources, so when I talk about resources, it's countries like Malaysia. Do we continue to be dependent on hydrocarbon, oil and gas, until the next 30 years? If that's going to deplete, or if that's going to be less important because of this shift towards green energy, and because of climate change, then where are the new sources of growth and revenue coming from? For the government and for our people. And that takes time, because this transition towards renewable energy can't happen overnight. There's a lot of investments that take place. And the lure and attractiveness of oil and gas is still there for countries like Malaysia that are producers of oil and gas, that maybe slows down the transition towards green energy and renewable energy. When you talk about becoming a high-income country, it's easy for us to say pay more, higher salaries, increase the minimum wage, but that can't come without significant improvements and increase in productivity. That takes time. That takes time. It's not easy for us to go from one model of economic development to a model of economic development where your total factor productivity increases, where innovation drives industries and companies. How do you reduce the dependence? If you look at our country for so long, there's been a huge dependency on cost competitiveness. The fact that we attract companies to come to Malaysia because we offer a very, very comparatively low cost of doing business here. That needs to change, because the more foreign workers we import, the more they depress incomes, and the more incomes cannot move, and they become sticky at a lower level. But if you want to move away from dependency on foreign workers, it takes time, because you have to encourage businesses to invest in automation, invest in hiring people, local people, and pay more. And that, again, takes time. What I'm trying to say is that when it comes to the government shifting and the country shifting its gears and moving into a new trajectory, it takes time and it can't happen overnight. So that's why I believe that the title is apt, because you really need a time horizon of 2 decades, if not 25 years, 30 years, for you to see a significant shift in the way we do things. That's why I'm very, very skeptical when leaders, government leaders, politicians, even business leaders promise change overnight, because I've seen that changes cannot happen overnight. Before I start the meat of my discussion or lecture, I wanted to give you a little context about where I come from. So I, as Simpei said just now, I was a politician. Some of you may be too young to remember, but I started in Parliament in 2008. That's when I won my first election. So I represented a constituency in the state of Negeri Sembilan called Rembau. Any Rembau people here? Clearly not. So I won my first election in 2008. I was sent to Parliament. And in my first term, I was not a minister. So I was fortunate in a way, because I remember somebody telling me that when you go to Parliament, it's good that you spend one term, 5 years, as a normal MP, what they call a backbencher, rather than go straight into becoming a minister, because you wouldn't know the first thing about legislation, about politics, if you go straight from becoming an MP to a minister. So I spent 5 years as a backbench MP. I was very active in Parliament. I liked to ask a lot of questions. I made a lot of speeches. And in 2013, I was fortunate enough to be, after the election, so I won my second election, Rembau as well. I was invited to join the cabinet. So as all of you know, cabinet is the highest decision-making body of our executive branch in the government. And I was made the Minister of Youth and Sports in 2013. I spent 5 very, very happy years at KBS, that's what we call it in Malay, Kementerian Belia dan Sukan. I'm not going to say much about the Olympics this time around, but it was, I had a good time at the Ministry of Youth and Sports. I used to call it the Ministry for Magic and the Ministry of the Future, The Ministry of the Future, because I looked after young people, and that was the future. And the Ministry for Magic, because when we do well in sports, it's always a magical moment. And we bring so much happiness to people when we do well and when we excel in sports. In 2018, that was when my term ended as Minister of Youth and Sports. We lost the election, and I still won my election, but my party lost. So we found ourselves in opposition. I was once again a normal member of Parliament, but now not a backbencher. Backbencher refers to MPs who support the government. I was an opposition member of Parliament. And during those 2 years, I was asked to look after the finance portfolio. So when you're in opposition, you are paired with a minister. So it's like a shadow minister. So I was the shadow finance minister. And so I debated a lot with the then finance minister, Jamaluddin about GST, about economic reforms and things like that. So that was really, really good experience because I had the chance to experience what life was like on the other side. And in 2020, 2 years after the 2018 election, the government fell. We can talk about that later. And there was a new government installed, and I was asked to come back as the Minister for Science, Technology and Innovation. That was, I think, sometime in March 2020. 2 days after that, we declared the MCO, Movement Control Order. And after about a year at the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, and I was looking after the vaccination, so I was made Coordinating Minister for COVID-19 immunization. I was sent in August of 2021 to become Minister of Health. And that, I must admit, was probably the toughest job I had in government because that was right slap bang at the height of the pandemic. August 2021 was the deadliest month for COVID in Malaysia. That was when I was sent to MOH. And in 2022, November, we had another election. So I contested 3 elections. That was my 4th election. I was asked to leave my seat in Rembau. And they didn't tell me where I was going to go. I was not told where I was going to stand. So as a politician, as a member of Parliament, you need to know where you're going to go, right? You need to know where you're going to stand because you need to prepare, you need to make sure that you know the area well. So nobody told me anything. And 3 days before nomination day, I was told that I was going to go to Sungai Buloh. And just for context, my party, the last time before I contested to Sungai Buloh, we lost that seat by 26,000 votes. So, I mean, you know, I accepted it, but I accepted it knowing that I was being sent there to die, obviously. But it's okay. I mean, I took it as a challenge. It was exciting for me, something new. You know, I mean, in life you have to get out of your comfort zone. In life you have to do challenges that are seemingly impossible. So I threw myself into the campaign at Sungai Buloh. You know, mountains were made to be climbed. And it went from 26,000 to 2,000, but I still lost. But I think, you know, the loss is one of the best things that's happened to me because adversity is good in politics. You know, I've not been in cabinet, I've lost, my party's lost elections, I've been in and out of government, now I've lost fully in politics, I'm out of politics completely because in January of 2023, as you know, I lost the elections in November 2022. In January 2023, I was thrown out of my own party. So I was sacked from my party. So, you know, khalas, that's it. I thought long and hard about what to do with my life, and I wasn't sure because I've been in politics for 20 years, in that same industry for 20 years. I thought, what can I do? This is new because I've lost elections before, my party's lost before, but I always was a member of Parliament. This time, nothing, right? And I don't even get a pension because I'm too young to get a pension. So I have no source of income. So I thought long and hard about it, and then one of the radio stations came to see me and said, hey, you want to be a DJ? You know, I thought long and hard about it because, you know, going from being a minister to a DJ. Then I said yes. I said, why not? Let's have some fun, right? I mean, we can think about politics another time. So I joined the radio station. I'm not a DJ every day. I do it 1 day a week. I think I'll go crazy if I do it every day. So I do it on Monday mornings, and it's been fantastic because I get to connect with people in a way that I couldn't when I was a politician. And people talk to me like a normal person now. After I joined the radio station, I had an idea with a friend of mine who was also suspended from our old party. Let's do a podcast. So we set up a podcast. We thought, maybe 50 people will listen to us. Thank God. I mean, today it's #1 in Malaysia, so thank you to anyone who's tuning into it. Yes. So the message is simply that, just as we don't know what's going to happen in the next 25 years, my life is an example of how we don't even know what's going to happen next year. So I don't know what's going to happen to my life next year. I used to have a 5-year plan. A lot of you guys at university, you have a 5-year plan, you have a 10-year plan. All I'm saying is that have that 5-year plan, work towards that 10-year plan, but life doesn't work out the way you want it to work out all the time. So always have a contingency plan as well in whatever it is that you want to do. Okay, so let's talk about Malaysia. If we look at our economy today, I think that we are here at this present moment at a point where things are starting to look better. Starting to look better because I think we have emerged strongly from the pandemic. We were one of the first countries to open our borders, and I remember this because I was there deciding that very decision. I think we got a huge bounce from post-COVID because of our decision to open up and because of the latent demand that was pent up during the pandemic and that was unleashed. I think that, and I say this as a Malaysian, not as a politician. As a politician, obviously I'm sad, but as a Malaysian, I'm happy that the election results resulted in political stability. That's so important. I mean, if you talk to any investor, they will tell you how important political stability is before they put money into that country. No investor, whether it's investors who invest in foreign direct investment, big projects like factories, whether it's investors that invest in the stock market, they don't want to invest in a country where they don't know who the government's going to be in the next 2 to 3 years. They want certainty of policy. They want to make sure that the government that is in place is at least in place until the next election. Because a lot of investors are scared when the new government comes in, new policies are introduced, new sectors are favored, new investments are made, and new budgets are drawn up. So I think we are in a pretty decent place. And that's been seen and manifested by many things which are good. I'm a critic of the present government, but I give credit where credit is due. So you can see now investments are coming in, you can see the ringgit strengthening, you can see the stock market really doing well. So these are good indicators. Yeah? And we can start to see that there are positive outlooks that have been given by international investment banks, by credit agencies towards Malaysia, if not a formal rating upwards, but it's good noise that's coming up. Malaysia is once again on the radar screen. That's good. Now the challenge here, of course, one is how do you make Main Street feel what Wall Street is feeling? What do I mean by that? Wall Street is, of course, in New York. That's where the stock exchange is. But Wall Street is also code name for the capital economy, the financial markets. What is the capital economy? What's the financial markets? That's the stock exchange, that's big businesses, that's capital owners. So right now, capital owners are starting to feel the good vibes because the stock market's going up, because investments are coming in. So people with capital, they're feeling pretty good because things are going well right now for Malaysia. Malaysia's back on the radar screen, and people are saying that the good days are back again. Now, the challenge for governments has always been how you convert or translate the sentiment on Wall Street, the capital markets, to Main Street, which is the man on the street, or the person on the street. That's always been the big challenge.
Because the way the capitalist economy is structured, people who own capital, they're a very small group of people. The rest are people who don't really own capital. That's your ordinary workers, your ordinary employees, your small to medium business people. These people want to start to feel the good news as well, good vibes as well. So it's always been how to augment the increase or the success of your capital economy so that the people's economy can feel it as well. So that's what the government's trying to think. How do we make sure that all these investments that are coming in can translate to a positive economic feel for the person on the street? And there are many ways to do this, of course, and the government is trying some. One, of course, is to ensure that people feel that growth by giving them stuff. What stuff? Giving them cash transfers. So people in what are called the B40 group start getting cash. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's just the government redistributing the gains that we get from the capital economy to the people, the people's economy. Secondly, we have to make sure that the biggest pain point for people today can be mitigated in some way. And what is that? That's the cost of living. Cost of living issue is not just here in Malaysia, but it's everywhere. We live in a either highly inflationary environment or depressed wage environment. Sometimes countries live in both, where wages are depressed, salaries are low, and the prices of goods keep on going up and up and up at a rate that is far more than the rate of your salaries going up. So the government has to think about how do we tackle this. One, you can do it on the supply side. So you can make sure that prices of goods stay down. And that's what we call subsidy. So now there's a great discussion in Malaysia about subsidy. Some of you have heard about this, right? Government wants to think about how do we tackle the issue of subsidy. Last year, our subsidy bill was 80 billion ringgit Malaysia. That's subsidies for fuel, petrol, diesel, cooking oil, for all sorts of other food items that we subsidize. And that doesn't include your indirect subsidy. So those are direct subsidies. Fuel direct subsidy, 205 per litre, RON95 at the pump, when the market price is more than 3 ringgit. That is a direct subsidy. That difference is being paid for by the government so that we can enjoy RON95 at 2 ringgit and 5 cents. What about the indirect subsidy? What's the indirect subsidy? You go to KKR, hospital. You go for a procedure there and you only pay 1 ringgit, 2 ringgit, or if you have a complex procedure, surgery or whatever, the bill comes in 60 ringgit, indirect subsidy, that comes from the government as well. So the government has to figure out what is the right level of subsidy that we can afford, the government can afford, and that doesn't burden the people if we take it away. That's always the decision that the government has to make. What can we afford, and what can ensure that people don't feel too affected by the removal in subsidy. That's why right now the government's thinking, okay, we've done diesel, it was a bit noisy, but things have settled down. So they've saved a bit of money from diesel, they've saved a bit of money from electricity pass-through, cost mechanism. So recently electricity for certain households have gone up, water has gone up as well for certain households. So they've saved a bunch of money there, more than 10 billion. But the big item, of course, is petrol. They're starting to think about petrol. Do we do petrol subsidy? So if you increase the petrol price from 205 at the pump to market price 3, that's not just going to affect people who drive cars and motorcycles that do petrol. It's going to affect the entire supply chain. So there's going to be a knock-on effect to everything else, because when petrol went up, you can already see some basic food items going up as well. When diesel went up, when petrol goes up, that involves far larger number of vehicles than diesel. That's going to have a huge impact on price. So the government has said we will announce it at the right time. What I'm trying to say is that in the next 10 to 20 years, the government has to start thinking about this great trade-off between whether or not we live within our means and how can we do this without affecting the rakyat too much. And this is going to be a huge challenge over the next 20 years. Because it won't end here. it won't end here, and successive governments after this will have to make sure that we are able to balance this between what the government can afford and what people can tolerate and accept. Because if the people cannot tolerate and accept, the government loses support. So that's the fundamental dilemma in terms of economic policy making when it comes to making sure that people are comfortable. The second thing that I wanted to touch on is economic inequality. So if we look at the country today, it's a country that has been described just now in the introductory speech as a higher middle income country. We are a higher middle income country. But is everyone in Malaysia higher middle income? No, no. If you look at the definition of higher middle income country, it's because GNI or GDP per capita defines us as a higher income country. But that's not a median score, that's a mean score. And people who do statistics will know that a mean score can be derived as such simply because you have a lot of people and you divide that by 2 and you get that, earning that amount of money. But a better indicator, of course, is the median. And when you look at the median, actually, we're not doing that well. Because we have a lot of people who earn a lot of money. A small amount of people who earn a lot of money, and a lot of people who earn not so much money. So we have to start thinking about how to make sure that incomes are not as unequal. Of course, we are not a communist country. We can't ensure that everyone has the same. But how can we design the economy, an incentive system, a wage policy, where, again, capital owners don't take almost everything and leave everyone else with almost nothing. If you have a situation like that, income inequality, then basically, in simple terms, the rich get richer and the rest don't get anywhere. So we have to start thinking about mechanisms on how we rebalance this. We did this when I was in government through the minimum wage. The government is trying something today called the progressive wage model, where they're trying to encourage and incentivize companies to pay people more. But even then, it's a government subsidy. Because the government says, okay, if you promise to pay your workers more, we will top up some of the addition. So the government can do that for the time being, but in terms of sustainability, how long can you do that for? So inequality is another big area in which we have to seriously think about. Now, I spent just a bit of time on economics. I'm going to touch on other trends that I think are important for us. Technology. I was Minister of Science and Technology for a year and a half. I saw a technology audit of Malaysia. I know where we are. I know where the rest of the world is. And I think that we need to try to be honest with ourselves about where we want to place ourselves in the global technology race. I'll give you a simple example of semiconductors. So almost 50% of the semiconductors, computer chips in the world, comes from Malaysia, comes through Malaysia. Not many people know this, but it does. But semiconductors, they are made in many different places. The fabrication takes place in one place. The lithography, the etching of the chip takes place somewhere else. It comes to Malaysia in a particular form. We don't make the entire thing. Our strength in semiconductors has always been testing and assembly. So basically the chip comes here, already etched, and we put it together, we package it together, we test it, and we send it out. So a lot of big semiconductor companies send their chips here, especially in Penang, to be tested, to be packaged, and to be assembled. Now, a lot of people said, well, that's all well and good, but that's not the high value end of semiconductor manufacturing. The high value end is the wafer fabrication, it's the integrated circuit design, it's the lithography of the IC design of the chip. We need to do that. Yeah, we can do that, but can we do that cost effectively? That's also the question, because you're competing with people like Taiwan, We keep competing with people like Korea? Or do we double down on the fact that we're good at testing and assembly and invest more in that capacity? So that problem illustrates to you that Malaysia, we can do stuff, certain stuff well, we can't do other stuff well. Do we go into that other stuff and try to go high end, waste a lot of money, or do we double down on what we're good at and slowly build the capacity to go up the value chain? So this, again, will unfold over the next 30 years because the race and the war for technology is real. What's happening today between China and the United States is perhaps the biggest conflict, non-military conflict since the Cold War, but this is an economic and technology conflict. If the Cold War was about politics, ideology, and proxy territory, today the Cold War, is about technology, it's about computer chips, and it's about supply chain. And Malaysia stands to benefit over the next 10 to 20 years if we play our cards right, in terms of if we are able to offer ourselves as a useful hedge against the China and US rivalry. What else is there? Skills and education. This is really, really tough, difficult subject because it involves not just our education system, but also what is sometimes loosely known as social contract in Malaysia. So let me touch on the education system first. Is our education system adept enough for the changes of the future? Are we investing in the right places? The education ministry every year has the biggest budget in Malaysia. But is it going to the right places? Is it going to the right level of teacher training? Is it going to the right level of technology acquisition? Is it going to the right level of infrastructure development? A lot of people are doubtful. Many of you are products of the national education system. And you would say that you are here despite the limitations of the national education system. So what can we do? I mean, it's not a question of throwing money at it. We're not a country that doesn't spend money on education. It's number one. Health ministry is number two in Malaysia as far as money is concerned every year in the budget. Number one is always education, number two is health ministry. But how can we better spend our money on education? How can we better train our teachers to deliver the sort of subjects and instructions and creativity that is needed for the future generation? Of course, you can tampal a patch on it. And tampal patch, by that I mean your programs after university, your micro-credentialing and all that, but the fundamental level of our educational attainment is still not up to par with the countries that we are trying to benchmark ourselves against. Because 2050, let's remember, we want to be a first-class country. That's really the end point. We want to be up there. 2050, Malaysia is not a mid-level country anymore. We are a mid-level country, but we have the potential to be right up there at the top of the table. 2050, you want to make sure your PISA scores in maths and science are the top 10 in the world. 2050, you want to make sure that Olympic Games, we're talking about gold medals and not other colors. 2050, we want to make sure that in terms of income, we are top 20 in the world, income per capita. Kuala Lumpur is one of the most livable cities in the world. Top infrastructure, top 10 airport in the world. That's what we want to aspire towards. So what I'm trying to say, it all comes back to the basic building blocks of ability, skills, and knowledge. And that comes from a world-class education system. So that requires political will, because when you want to touch anything education in this country, you are up against a huge political wall. The political wall of the bureaucracy, the political wall of what I term as the social contract. And I think there is a way around this. There is a way to respect the fundamental basis of this country, which is enshrined in the Constitution, yet allow all Malaysians to succeed, to flourish, and to make sure that they are rewarded for their successes. And I think that's the way and the direction that we must move towards when it comes to education. Some of the other challenges that I want to touch on before I stop, because I know that there are going to be many questions. One, of course, sustainability and climate change. This is a key existential crisis of our time. Existential crisis in a sense that if we don't do anything about this, the existence of the human race is compromised because of rising temperatures. The havoc that it will wreak on the globe and on Malaysia is not the future anymore. It's the here and now. you can already see events that we have never seen before. Drought, flooding, all sorts of natural disasters that come from climate change. So this is something that we have to think long and hard about, because, why? Again, this comes to a classic dilemma. We are asked to transition, but we live in a world which is dominated by countries who have been the biggest contributors towards carbon emissions, telling countries like us now to go and transition. So this, again, we want to do this. We want to save the world, but we're also a developing country. Western countries who polluted the world for the last hundreds of years are now telling other countries we must make this transition. They're not helping us. They're not aiding us. Yeah, they say nice things, they say they're going to give money and all that, but they don't. And they have been the perpetrators of the biggest carbon emissions in history of mankind since the Industrial Revolution. So yes, we want to contribute. Malaysia and other developing countries, we want to make sure that we can capture carbon, that we can move towards renewable energy, but this costs money. And it's harder for a country like us to do this than countries that have reached that level of industrialization and are willing to pour hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and billions of dollars into the transition towards renewable energy like the United States is doing. And this might change if Trump wins the election in November, because he might just say, screw climate change, just drill, drill, drill. So these are things that we have to think about. Maybe, I know there's so many other things that I want to talk about, but in the interest of time, just one last thing. You can talk about the economy, you can talk about education skills, you can talk about climate change. Sorry, there's one more that I want to talk about before the last thing. The other challenge that I feel that we seriously need to anticipate and talk about now, over the next 25 years or so, is changing demographics of health. This is really important because I just came from the Ministry of Health, my last job in government. So you have one, changing demographics in the form of an aging society. So by 2030, the number of Malaysians over the age of 60 will be almost 30%. We're an aging society basically in 2030. And that poses a problem, because when you have an aging society, then the number of people who are supporting the aging population shrinks. Right now, when you have a young society, you have a bigger bottom of the pyramid, smaller top of the pyramid. So a lot of people working so that we can support the elderly, whether it's in the form of social security, health, public health care, or personal support for our elderly. One day, that pyramid is going to go the other way around. More old people, less young people. When you have more old people, less young people, like Japan and Korea, and the replacement rate drops, your fertility rate drops, you're in serious existential crisis. So climate is not just the only existential crisis right now. Some countries, the existential crisis, the crisis of existence, is also their fertility rate and the aging population. I was in Korea a couple of months ago, and I saw the president of Korea speak at a conference. And apart from speaking about geopolitical rivalry, because Korea is of course in a very precarious place in the world, next to China, south of North Korea, north of the Taiwan Straits, he spoke about the demographic change of aging population and decrease in fertility. Happening in Malaysia too. Fertility rates are dropping. Young people don't want to have babies in Malaysia, or don't want to have as many kids. So that's a lifestyle choice. The government cannot force you to have kids. But it brings with it a change that you're going to see in 25 years. When the fertility rate drops, it's all below replacement rate right now, people live longer. We have to think about how to pay for that. How to pay for healthcare, how to pay for social security, how to pay for pensions, how to pay for care. That's going to cost money. So the next 25 years, we're talking about a big bill, big financial bill that we have to take. And it's not just about people living, more older people. People are living longer. Just now, the director said life expectancy has gone up to 72. It's going to go up more. 82. People are living into their 90s. I mean, we're the prime minister at 90, whatever. I mean, Biden should take a lesson from us, right? So people are living longer. And the problem is, in Malaysia, they're not necessarily living longer, healthier lives. They're living longer lives that are riddled with disease. If you look at Malaysia, NCD, non-communicable disease, that's diseases that cannot be transmitted. That's your diabetes, that's your cardiovascular disease, that's your hypertension, all of that, off the charts. This was, after COVID, this was the biggest clear and present danger for me when I was in the Ministry of Health. Those things, when they run out of control, you're talking about a public healthcare bill later of looking after people. That's going to go through the roof. And people are going to live longer. And we don't have public pensions for everyone in this country. Government has to think. Some countries have public pensions. That means everyone gets a pension. But everyone would have paid some form of pension insurance throughout their careers. Are we ready for that? If I become Prime Minister and I say, okay, everyone has to contribute towards some form of public pension other than EPF, so that not only EPF contributors are covered, everyone is covered. As long as you're Malaysian, you get a pension of 500 ringgit every month when you retire, for instance. But you have to contribute a bit every month. Probably have a revolution. So, but it's a question that we have to ask. Who's doing this? Who's doing this scenario planning? Who's doing this future proofing for the country? I mean, these are things that it's not KJ that knows about. Everyone in government knows about this. They know about this. It's coming. It's coming to us front and center. And we've not thought long and hard about how to prepare ourselves for the future. I just want to end by touching on one thing, which is I've sketched a pretty scary scenario for the country. But I want to leave this hall with you all hopeful about the country. And I want to end by saying that we have a lot to be hopeful about in Malaysia. I've given you the challenges because I'm a realist. I don't like to paint a rosy picture when the rosy picture is not a reality. But I believe that the future can be rosy because we have a lot of latent potential. I've always described, whenever I go overseas, when people ask me about my country, I say good things obviously, but I say that we can be so much better. This is a country which is blessed with an inordinate amount of resources which has not been fulfilled to its potential. Natural resources. Can you imagine a country with fertile soil like ours? We have oil and gas. We have fertile soil. We have a plantation industry. Any given time, any given day, we have an economy that operates with multiple engines. Manufacturing, oil and gas, commodities and plantation, services now, because all tourists want to come to this country. We are blessed. We're not a country that faces natural disaster, that faces drought, that doesn't have fertile land to grow food. We have all these things. We have a pretty dynamic population. We have a diversity that sometimes people end up fighting all over about, but should become a source of strength. Don't let our diversity be a liability. Let it be an asset for us. I mean, it's always a liability on social media because habis gaduh. But at the end of the day, this is what people come to us for. And I'll give you one simple example. When I was Minister of Health, one area which I wanted to prioritize and which now is seeing a lot of success is clinical research. What's clinical research? Clinical research and clinical trials. Before pharmaceutical companies put a drug or medicine into the market, it has to go through clinical trials. First, non-humans. Once it's safe, once it's effective, they go into humans. Clinical trials need to be done in a very, very controlled environment. I wanted Malaysia to be number one in Southeast Asia. We are number one in Southeast Asia. Amongst other reasons why we're number one, Pfizer, Roche, Merck, all these big pharmaceutical companies come here because they like testing pharmaceuticals on a diverse population. You have genes here from China, from India, from the Malay archipelago, so that they can see the effectiveness of the drugs on different genetic profiles. So that's an example of how our diversity sometimes is a source of silly arguments. In fact, it's a source of wealth and strength and attractiveness for us. Multiply that, replicate that into other sectors, and the sky is the limit for Malaysia. So, who supports football? Who football fans here? Football fans here? Football fans? Who do you support, sir? In England. MU. Any non-Manchester United supporters? I'm a Manchester United supporter. Anyone else? It's okay. Anyone else? Who do you support, sir? Arsenal. Okay. So, great analogy for me to end. We are a great country with great potential. At the moment, we are Arsenal. We can be Manchester United one day. Thank you very much.
Very much for a very insightful talk. In his lecture, KJ has touched on various topics, including economy, technology, education, climate change, changing demographic and health challenges, and of course, he gives us hopes.
There will be so many uncertainties in the upcoming 2 decades, but I think one thing for sure, I believe that it won't take too long for you to go back to politics. And once you have become the Prime Minister way before by 2050, please do not forget UTAR. Prof. I try my best. Well, I'm sure there are many burning questions in you that you would like to ask KJ. So I will throw the mic and the questions to the audiences. For those who want to ask questions, you may put up your hands. And then when you are called upon, please state your name and which faculty or institutions that you are from. Keep your questions short and sweet so that we can have more chance for everybody to ask as many questions as possible. Okay? I think maybe we can take 3 questions before we can get KJ to answer them. Alright? So is there anybody that have burning questions that you would like to start the ball rolling? Oh yes, okay.
I do want to know, so since you went to Sungai, this is political, eh?
Yeah, sorry, ask your name and
I'm Puan Rosita Ayuno, Faculty of Accountancy and Management. Khairy mentioned just now, you had 3 days before your nomination announcement, you had 3 days, and after that, I think you had 2 weeks to prepare for your campaign. So, what was your strategic move? I know you've lost a seat, but how can you garner support in a very short time? Given that you were given, let's say you are given a chance again, so how would you do different?
Thank you. Thank you, Puan. Any other questions we can take? Yeah. Alright, maybe the one in the white color t-shirt in the center. Yes.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Khairy. My name is Lika Choi. I'm from LKCFAS. I'm currently UTAR Film Club Chair. This is an offer actually for you.
Yes.
Hang on, let me cook.
You're not ask me to act in the movie.
Would you be interested to make a part 2 to your previous skit many years ago where you drove as a taxi driver?
Yes.
It's a serious question because the film club is actually quite passionate and interested.
Happy to discuss.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, we have someone in a red jacket shirt. Yeah, over there.
Hello, good evening, sir. So, I just want to ask.
Sorry, maybe your name and your faculty.
My name is Khairy. I'm from Area and I'm currently a student of economics. So I just want to ask. I know always talks about structural reform of the country. And right now, if we look at structural reform on the supply side, oil and gas makes up 20% of our GDP. But right now, we want to move to more clean economy, sustainable economy. So what does the future look like for the Malaysia when we move away from this oil and gas?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll hold the question session first and let KJ answer again.
Yeah, thanks. First question about the election in Sungai. So, I've never. So Sungai is basically urban sea. There are parts of it which are maybe suburban a bit, but Kota Damansara, all that is very, very urban sea. Klang Valley. I contested in Rembau. Rembau is rural/suburban, a bit of Seremban, but quite traditional. So it was the first time. I was excited. I mean, the 26,000, I thought it was going to be very, very difficult. So I was prepared to lose. I had to put it in my heart that, you know, if I win, it's going to be extremely, extremely unusual. But I tried hard. So I think the first thing that I did was I studied about Sungai Buloh, the kawasan, what was needed. Basically, not just Sungai Buloh, but Sungai Buloh goes all the way from Bajaras to Kota Damansara. We live there, so you know it's a wide area. Sangat luas kawasan dia. So I designed a manifesto for every different place. This area we want to do this area we want to do this. Things that are realistic. I don't want to promise, you know, no toll and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, so things that are community-based. Here we want to set up Center for Autism. Here we want to set up Youth Center. So things that I thought we could do, realistic stuff. So we took time to understand Sungai Buloh. Even though just a few days, I told my team, okay, was there, go down to the ground, ask what people want, localize the issue. Because I knew that if we spoke on national issue, we would lose. You know, things were, the sentiment was against my party then, against Barisan Nasional. So I said, localize the campaign. So I did a video for every single locality. This locality will do this locality will do that. And I think people like that because I said, you know, one, avoid national issues because, you know, there's a lot of noise there. Secondly, make it local so that it resonates with people. Third, don't make it personal because I don't like to go into personal attacks. They were attacking me and then, you know, they were saying satu di KJ, satu di somebody, I don't have to say who. So I wanted to move away from that. You know, so I did that. I made it all about the kawasan. And I think it worked. I think that, you know, the guy who won got 50,000 votes. I got 48,000 votes. Very close. What would I have done differently? Great question. So 50-48 doesn't tell the whole story. The guy who won, which is from PH, Rahman, got 50,000 votes. I got 48,000 votes. But the third place, which was passed, got something like 20,000 votes passed. That was my blind spot. I was looking at PH. I didn't look at pass. You see? And that pass votes, if they didn't contest, would mostly have gone to me, I think. And that was my blind spot. I thought that in Sungai Buloh, the competition was with PH. It was with PH, but I didn't realize that that third candidate would take so much votes from me. And I knew this early on the night of the election because the first results that come out are the postal votes, police and army. When the postal votes came out, I won. So I was one of the only BN candidates that won army camp and police votes. But then I saw, so I was a bit scared already. And surely enough, at the end of the day, they took too much. What would I have done differently? I realized that PN had a very, very good strategy, especially on social media, on TikTok. And I think we didn't spend enough time there. We didn't spend enough time courting that particular vote. Young Malay demographic votes on TikTok.
This previously you were on Twitter.
Yeah.
So now the social media have changed. Maybe you are saying that you overlooked
I mean,
the platform.
the platform. Because the next election it can be another platform. So I think a lot of people overlook that particular platform this time around. We thought, it's a kids platform, but it turns out that your U18 crowd, that's where they got the news from. And I think had I spent a bit more time courting that particular crowd, I may have gotten closer to it. Yeah? But anyway, you're from Singapore, right? Yeah, thank you for voting for me. Assumption. I won a gold medal in jumping to conclusions. Hachai, yes, let's talk about the thing about that you suggested. He's referring to this short video that I did on Meter many years ago. And I don't know if you guys seen it, but I played a taxi driver. So I think it'll be a great project. I'm kind of available right now, so I'm going to do it while I'm still available. We can talk about it later. Khairy, great question on supply side. Look, I'm a huge believer in the green economy, I'm a huge believer in transition, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. If you look at the last COP, there was a huge debate on whether to say phase out of fossil fuels. And you're starting to see almost the oil and gas companies fighting back against the transition. So as much as I'm a believer in sustainability transition, I don't think oil and gas is disappearing anytime soon. I think over the next 20 years there will be some transition, but I think that it will still be a big sector for us. What do we replace it with later? So can it be replaced? Yes, it can be replaced. Can we create a supply side economy from the new transition towards renewable energy? Yes, because I think that we have a lot of things going for us. So for instance, I don't know if you've seen my episode with the Chief Minister of Premier of Sarawak. Sarawak is a big supporter in transitioning from oil and gas, fossil fuels towards hydrogen. So that's an immediate statement of intent that they believe that contribution from the supply side that comes from ONG can not be completely replaced, but partly replaced by hydrogen. When I was in Mosty, I was convinced, I was skeptical before, I was convinced that as part of your renewable energy mix in the future, you can also start thinking about nuclear. Because nuclear is today much cheaper to produce than it was previously. Of course, you have to think about the implications when it comes to waste and safety, but that's something else as well. So, can renewable energy, carbon capture, hydrogen, maybe even nuclear, replace oil and gas in the long term? I think yes, but I think we have to put the building blocks in place in terms of the companies that are willing to do it, investments that are necessary, and the people are trained in these new technologies that can take over from ONG. But I don't think oil and gas is going to go away in the next, at least the next 20 years.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a very good first round. Okay, so now we are going to the second round of the Q&A session. Anyone? I think the gentleman at the last row has been putting up his hands since the first round. Maybe we'll pass with the green t-shirts. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Khairy. My name is Rahman from Faculty of Engineering and Science. So just now you mentioned about the Wall Street to Main Street. So I actually wondered in 2050, the one you mentioned will be better talk. So I wonder how Malaysia can keep the human resource, like the people who can do the best work, like just secure them from going to other country. So because I'm actually the vice chair of MBOT, and I see that technology workers mostly are more looking forward to working in China as rather than Malaysia, because they think that it's low pay and not that suitable for development or like career-wise. So yeah, that's all the question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I'm going to be a little bit biased. Let's give the girls a chance first, okay? Yeah. This is the one in the black color sweater. The mic to the one here with the black color sweater. The mic.
afternoon, Mr. Khairy. I'm Grace. I'm from the FCI. And I have a question about the aging population. I'm wondering, how do you think we can encourage young Malaysians to still live here without actually having the desire to settle overseas? Because, respectively, I thought that to support the elderly in the country is actually because that we, the young generation, we're supposed to lead the country, and whereas the elderly is that we're supposed to take care of them. But I guess without us, the youth, if we can't take care of the elderly in here, I don't think we should move to another country if we want to settle the aging population here, which is a big problem. So how do you think we can settle this problem? Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, the gentleman.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum. Okay, very simple question. If you are the PM in 10 years time, what are the transformation plan that you're going to do based on this scenario? Optimistic scenario, realistic scenario, and pessimistic scenario. Then can I have one more question? My name is Anwar from Faculty of Economics and Management. Okay. When short, do we have data analytic scientists for the sport that we lost? Actually, most of the game that we lost is based on a thing that we are lacking of the data analytics. Okay. When you are the sport minister last time, do we have the data analytics scientists? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think the question from Mr. Yap and from Grace were quite similar. Both were asking about retention of talent, how we can make sure that people stay in Malaysia. I'm not going to lie by saying that young people are not attracted towards working and leaving Malaysia. I think for a lot of you, for a lot of young people, that's quite a compelling scenario, especially if you get a good job that pays a lot and the prospects for career promotion is better. And this is, I think, quite a big challenge for Malaysia, and we have to think about how we can realistically slow it down, if not reverse it completely. I think the first thing is we have to make sure that we invest in sectors which are able to provide higher income for Malaysians. And this sounds easy, but it isn't. Because the government has to sit down with the private sector and say, how can we give you incentives? And how can we offer you and support you to have market access so that you can grow in a way that you can also reward Malaysia with better jobs for Malaysians. And this is really the crux of the matter when it comes to brain drain, is that for a lot of companies, they will come and say, we are not incentivized to offer higher salaries. There's not the right investment and the right push from the government for us to go into the right sector, for us to give better salaries to Malaysians. So we have to sit down and have an honest conversation with the private sector. How is it that you imagine we can incentivize you so that you can create these better jobs? That's the abstract. The specific is this, and I don't like speaking in abstract. Is to sit down with your Malaysian companies involved in manufacturing. How many foreign workers you invest today? X number. How can we transition from that X number over the next 5 to 10 years into a highly automated factory where you end up perhaps not employing more workers, less workers maybe, but you will end up taking more Malaysians in managerial positions and positions which are related to higher technology. And that really requires a lot of work at the firm level, at the industry level. And somebody's got to do this. You can't just have overarching plans. You have to have a Ministry of International Trade, Industry, and Investments that's actually going down and talking to the industry, saying that how can we move from your 100 foreign workers into 50 additional local Malaysians paid 5,000 and above. When you do that, then you have real structural transformation. Otherwise, it's not structural transformation. That's what you want to see. Industrial growth that supports wage growth. You don't want to see industrial growth that depresses wages and that ends up bringing and importing a lot of foreign migrant workers. That's not going to do anything for anyone. So you have to try to create that ecosystem in which the private sector is incentivized to not just move up the value chain, everyone talks about that, but to create those jobs to justify. That's how you start getting people to stay. And that's how you start getting people to come back. Again, coming back to my interview with the Sarawak Chief Minister, Datuk Sri Tan Sri Abdul, he spoke of the fact that now he's attracting Sarawakians back to Sarawak to work in the right sectors, to work in hydrogen economy, to work in renewable energy. He's setting up a cancer center in Sarawak. He set up a cardiology, Sarawak set up a cardiology center many years ago, and they brought back Sarawakians to work. So the point is, if you build and invest things in the right sector, you get people to come back. But if you leave things as they are, people will go. They go to Singapore, they go to Hong Kong, they go to Europe, they go everywhere else, they go to the Middle East. So it has to be deliberate. You cannot leave this to market forces. You have to sit down with the market and shape the market. I always say, people say, what is your economic philosophy, KJ? I said, I'm not a free market libertarian. I'm not a socialist either. I'm someone who believes that government has a role in shaping markets. Sitting down with the private sector and saying, we'll provide incentives and the push for you to make sure that we can create that market, and shape incentives to create the market. So I think this has to take place. And of course, there are other things which are more sensitive that we can also talk about in terms of the perception amongst some young Malaysians that things are not fair, that they don't have a fair chance here. And I think we should have a conversation about this. We should understand that frustration that some Malaysians face. No point in me staying here, because this is not a country that will value me anyway. This is not a country that's going to promote me anyway. So I think we need to start off from the position that if every single Malaysian succeeds, the country succeeds. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter whether you come from Perlis or you come from Sabah. Doesn't matter if you are rich or if you're poor. Doesn't matter if you're Malay, you're Bidayu, or you're Sikh. We're going to succeed. So that has to be really the tone from the top. Tone from the top, the government saying that, yes, there are certain incentives that we give for certain communities, that's fine, but that doesn't hinder us. And I think when that's the case, then people feel better about staying here. They don't feel resentment. They don't feel bitter. I sometimes feel so sad because I see young Malaysians, there's this resentment. Saya tak dihargai di tanah sendiri. Saya terpaksa pergi tempat lain. I don't want you to feel that. So, one is industrial policy that changes because of government's decision to shape markets. And the other thing is to really have this conversation to make sure that every single Malaysian has a fair shot in Malaysia, has a proper shot in Malaysia, has a decent shot in Malaysia. Again, coming back to the fact that our diversity should be an asset and not a liability for us. Janua just now asked me about, let me start with the easier one, which is sports. Yeah, Janua, do it again. Prof Anwar. Asked about two questions, one really big question, the other one is easier question about data yes, we do. So when I was at the Ministry of Youth and Sports, we introduced what was called the Podium Program. So Podium Program is only for athletes who can medal at Olympics, Asian Games, and Commonwealth Games. So every single athlete who's part of the Podium Program had with them a dedicated team, not just coaches, but physiotherapists, nutritionists, sports psychologists, as well as sports data analysts. So I went myself to see, because I want to make sure that everyone had access to this. So I went, when I was there, John Wei was still playing. So I went to see his podium support, and we had a library of games for Chong Wei. So we opened, so say he was playing Chen Long or Lin Dan. We'd open the Lin Dan file, and data analytics will tell you how many times Lin Dan would do a drop shot, how many times Lin Dan would smash. So that's the level that we supported. I don't know what happened after I left. No, I mean, I don't know. But when I was, I saw that for myself. So we definitely did that, because I believed in hard data for sports. Of course, talent is important, hard work is important, but you need to also tell Chong Wei, you know, this is how many percentage chance Lin Dan is going to drop shot you in a game. And in 2016, when I was still there, Chong Wei beat Lin Dan in the semi-finals. Just not because of that. So transformation and for 3 scenarios: worst scenario, best scenario, medium scenario. I mean, it's a huge question. I can't go into every single scenario, and to go into specific is a bit tough. But let me answer the abstract. I think, you know, whoever becomes the prime minister needs to be able to accept losing an election. That means that they are willing to do the right thing in the time that they are given. If you have prime ministers who are worried about the next election, they're not going to be transformational. Transformational means that you are ready to take the tough calls and to whatever cost comes next. So there's so many transformation things that we want to do in terms of, like I said just now, in terms of education, in terms of economic restructuring, in terms of healthcare. Healthcare, I mean, the first thing I'll do is, because I just came from TCLC, right? You know how much we spend for public healthcare every year in Malaysia as a percentage of our GDP? Not even 3%. 2.58% in 2018. A high, upper middle income country should spend 5% of GDP on public healthcare. Public, not private hospital, public healthcare. That's your KKM hospitals and your clinic center. The first thing I do is 5% to healthcare. But 5% must come from somewhere. That's transformational. So I'm going to have to disappoint some other ministry. I'm going to have to take away from something else. And when you take away stuff, you're going to piss a lot of people off. But you have to have the ability to say, I'm willing to disappoint some people to do the right thing. When I was health minister, I was sent to do a course at Harvard Kennedy School. And Harvard Kennedy School lesson in leadership, the first thing they teach you is, what is leadership? Leadership, defined by the Harvard Kennedy School, is disappointing people at the rate that they can accept. That means don't disappoint people too much. Don't disappoint people too little. Because when you're leading people, you can only disappoint them if you want to be a good leader. Good leader who pleases everyone is impossible. You're not a good leader. So disappoint people at the rate they can accept. So I suppose the answer is, I'll give you a small example about healthcare. I do that, but you have to start thinking about, who to disappoint. Can they accept it? What do I do next? Tackle pensions, for instance. Tackle defense policy. Do we need the army and the armed forces to be the size that it is? Do we move towards a more reserve-based army so that we can spend money on other things? So many things across the spectrum that there is to do, but you have to start with the point that you are not scared to disappoint people, but at a rate that they can accept.
Okay, now I think we can go for another round of the questions. Okay, I have you because you have prepared.
Good afternoon. My name is Hamish. I'm from UTAR. I've been going through reports, and one of the reports says that 9 million expired COVID-19 vaccine doses, but 185 million have been thrown away. So basically, the question is, why did this happen? It could have been donated to third world countries months before expiry, and also the fact that medical scientists worldwide are acknowledging the devastating side effects of the vaccines, including fatal outcomes. What are we going to do about this? Can those affected seek restitution? Another question is, as you said about clinical trials, when vaccine was administered in Malaysia, will we be part of this clinical trial?
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Hi sir, my name is Rao. I'm from KFPS. Okay, I want to ask a question here. From my personal experience, I started a company like months ago. It's actually a rocket company. Rocket, like aerospace company. So I went to reach out some of the founders, and all of them were a little skeptical and very judgmental, because for them they wanted more like a reasonable company, you know. Then it hit me that I realized that Malaysia is not ready for deep technologies such as rocket company or nuclear reactor or supercomputer as well. So my question is that, by when do you think that Malaysia will be ready for this kind of technologies? Because we only have 30 years plus or so for the half century. So do you think that when would we become a country which that rather than assembling stuff, then start creating?
Okay, thank you. One more question. Yes. The gentleman. Yes.
My name is Abdul from the industry. I have a question about the syntax technology and so forth. So I used to work with the Ministry of Health before this 10 years ago. So I know about the syntax and so forth. So when we initiated the algorithm into endgame, so currently what do you see the direction, trajectory that we can go for this algorithm, and also for what is the impact with these syntaxes? And second question, we have the plans to go back to the political organizer.
Okay, great questions. Really, really good questions. I'm going to start over there. Sorry, your name. Hamish. Great question on something that I was responsible for. So Hamish refers to the doses of vaccines that expired and what could have been done to avoid, and also restitution or compensation for vaccine injury. I think the first thing to be very clear is we didn't buy expired vaccines. Some people say, oh, we bought expired vaccines. When we bought the vaccines, they were all good. It's just that vaccines, like anything else in life, especially perishable items, have a shelf life. And once you're past that shelf life, then you have to dispose of it because it's a pharmaceutical product. You can't keep it, it's dangerous. So you must destroy it. Many countries destroyed millions of doses of vaccine. And I'll tell you why it happened. When we started buying vaccines, I was in charge for this. We negotiated with multiple manufacturers. I don't know if you guys remember 2020 when COVID started. We didn't know
who was going to finish up with the vaccine that was going to be used. Multiple companies started research and development, manufacturing, clinical trials. We didn't know. So I went to cabinet then. I was Minister for Science, and then I was appointed coordinating Minister for Vaccines, COVID-19 immunization. Because PM said, health industry is having a lot of work trying to manage with the COVID cases. KJ, Science Minister, can you do the vaccines? I said, okay. So I went back to cabinet and I said, look, we can't put our eggs in one basket. In life and in my management philosophy, I like to start with principles. So don't put your eggs in one basket. Like anyone who invests your savings, you don't put everything in one basket. So we didn't know. Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, nobody knew which was going to cross the line first. So I went to cabinet and I said, can we spread our bets? Take a bit from this, take a bit from this, take a bit from this. So I got the experts to advise me which ones are likely to be safe and to cross the line first. So they said, okay, Pfizer, AZ, Sinovac. So then I went back to cabinet, can we have a portfolio approach, a basket of vaccines? And it was good because it wasn't just completion risk, it was different technologies. So Pfizer was your mRNA, Sinovac was your inactivated vaccine, and AstraZeneca was your viral vector, the virus vaccine. Because some people, they have allergic response, we'll give them another vaccine, right? And that was good. So we hedged against the type of vaccines as well. Then the question was, how much vaccines do we buy from each different manufacturers? And at what price do we pay for it? So I had to go to each manufacturer, negotiate, blah, 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 blah. And then we came up with our portfolio. I went back to cabinet and I said, this is the number of vaccines that we want to buy. The first approval was to cover 80% of the population with 2 doses of vaccines. And then something really terrible happened. It was when I went back to the manufacturers like Pfizer, okay, we're ready to buy. So I remember 60% of our portfolio was going to be Pfizer. Then Pfizer told me, okay, thank you Malaysia. By the way, this is your delivery schedule. And I couldn't believe it. Our delivery schedule was for the next year. And I said, why? Oh, because Europe, because America, Canada, all the Western countries are going to get it first. I said, that's not fair. And they said, no, because they paid in advance already. This is advance payment and all that kind of stuff. This is when I really, really felt, with Gaza and everything now, I'm even more, but that was when I really, really felt extremely angry with the West, how they hoarded the vaccines first. So I said, okay. So I knew then that we would always be at the back of the queue. Then, as we started giving vaccines, we received expert advice that 2 doses was not going to be enough. We needed a 3rd dose to make sure that you have enough community resistance so that COVID will go away like it's gone away now. Well, it's still there, but it's not as big a problem. So in order for us to make sure that we have enough vaccines to vaccinate and immunize every Malaysian with a 3rd and some with a 4th dose, that's why we made the order. And I had to make the order because I saw what happened last time. I saw that Western countries hoarded. It's not like going to the pharmacy and buying Panadol. You have to put an order months in advance. So we bought enough so that every single Malaysian can have a booster dose. But it turns out that not all Malaysians took a booster dose, because by the time we got towards the end of 2021, the cases started coming down. The severity started coming down because mostly elderly people, people with hypertension, comorbidity, they took 3 doses, they took 4 doses, and they were fine. And the rest of us were okay. So I made a decision with the best available information to save lives of Malaysians, to make sure we had enough to vaccinate everyone with a 3rd dose, with a 4th dose, 1st booster, 2nd booster. And we simpan, that was our strategic reserve, because nobody knew at that time. Nobody knew at that time. It wasn't me saying, oh, just buy for the sake of buying. No, because I saw that it takes months for us to get the vaccine. Better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry. So we had that in reserve. And when people decided, I've taken a booster dose, I don't want a second booster, or I've taken 2, I don't want a booster, can't force them anymore. And that's why we had a strategic reserve that at the end of the day was not used, and we had to destroy it. Why didn't we give it to other countries? We offered, believe me. I gave to Laos, I gave to Bangladesh, I gave to Bosnia, and then after a while, when we had the strategic reserve, all the poorer countries also got vaccines. They got access to vaccines because other countries were donating, they bought themselves. Suddenly the world was flush with supply. So we tried to give it away, but no one wanted it. So at the end of the day, we had the reserves just in case. So because for me, looking after Malaysians during the pandemic, it had to be just in case. I could not be in a situation where I did not have just in case. Where I opened my medicine cabinet and no more vaccines. I had to make sure that when I opened my medicine cabinet, there were enough vaccines for me. So I don't regret what I did. Yes, it cost money, but I think the amount of money that we would have lost had we stayed in lockdown, had we not been able to exit as quickly as we did and open the borders that we did, is much more than the loss from the vaccines. So, I did the best that I could with the best available information. I've been subject of investigation by Parliament, by White Paper, by PAC. I'm still a free man today, so even if you don't support or agree with what I did nothing wrong legally, and my conscience is clear. I made decisions in the best interest to save Malaysians. And if that meant buying too many vaccines because I wanted to make sure that we were safe just in case, and so be it. It was my call, and I'm responsible for it, 100%. Coming to restitution or compensation. You should ask the current Minister of Health, your MP, to ask this question in Parliament. Because we had a vaccine injury scheme where if there was evidence of causation that the vaccine resulted in something, adverse event, death, injury, then we would definitely compensate. And there were cases where we did, where there was allergic reaction, anaphylaxis, thrombocytopenia, in one case I think, where we gave compensation. Because vaccines are not without risk. We always balance risk and benefit in medicine. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but this is what the doctors were advising me. Saying, even if we take a normal vaccine, some people get pain, some people get fever. So we have to say that the benefit was more than the risk. But we definitely had a vaccine injury scheme. And many cases came forward. But the important thing is to establish causality. A lot of anti-vaxxers until today chase me. So recently I was in UM for a function and there was a bunch of anti-vaxxers there. And there was a Q&A session like this, and then they took advantage of the fact that I was there and they had to go at me. They may be around here, I'm not sure. But two things that was important for me to say to them. One is causality is very important in life. It cannot be a coincidence, it cannot be a loose correlation, it has to be scientific causality. Yeah? You cannot say 2 years after the fact something happened and blame it on the COVID vaccine. Because thrombocytopenia, blood clots in the AZ vaccine, only manifests itself 2-3 weeks maximum after the vaccine. So you can't easily establish causation. Causation is very important. We have a committee to look at causation, independent committee to look at causation. But secondly, and this is something that I think is also important, I can easily say, you didn't establish causation, it's, please don't talk to me. But I think it's important to show empathy. Because even if the vaccine didn't cause something, obviously that person is suffering from something. And they are led to believe that it's because of the vaccine. So I also don't want to be the person to dismiss and say, this is not scientific, you believe that the earth is flat, get out of my face. I have to show empathy and say, look, let's try to establish, give me your medical record. So in UM, there was this lady who was suffering from an ailment, and she was brought by this group of people who were campaigning against vaccines, and basically really angry, asking me for restitution. I said, can I have your name, and can I have your where you were treated? She gave me her name, she gave me her IC, she gave me the hospital. We checked with the hospital, Bobby, we checked, right? The hospital X about this person, public hospital. And surely enough, the expert opinion from physicians that looked after her said it was nothing to do with the vaccine. But she was led to believe by people that it was something to do with the vaccine. But I don't want to shout at her and say you're wrong. Obviously she's suffering. So we want to try and find ways to help her, I think. So I think, yes, you believe in science, but you have to have empathy for people as well. Especially those for whom there's no answer. Science is not giving them an answer. They don't know why they're sick. And somebody says a vaccine is a vaccine. Okay, deep tech. So when I was at Science Ministry, we have a funding agency called Cradle. I don't know if you know Cradle. So Cradle funds startups in Malaysia. They give grants for startups, yeah? And I noticed that Cradle was giving a lot of money, especially to startup tech companies that do e-commerce platforms. You know, e-commerce platforms, you get money. Deep tech, you don't get money. So I said to them, I said, look, we have to have a different way of supporting technology in this country. E-commerce platforms are easy because people understand it. Hey, by the way, I've set up the competitor to Tunku or to Shane or something like that. Oh, I'm going to give you money. I'm going to give you $1 million. You know, I'm going to give you 5 million ringgit because I understand this model. I'm going to come up with a disruptor to lorry services, like Grab, a lorry. I'm going to give you money. I'm going to come up with disruptor services for tractors. Oh, you get that. And I said to myself, look, those are great because that's tech, yeah? But we also have to believe in moonshots. What are moonshots? Moonshots are your bigger stuff. I mean, it's a judgment call how much you spend on the easy wins or easier wins, e-commerce platforms, and how much you spend on deep tech. But a bit of it has to be for deep tech. So we created a deep tech fund. I don't know if it's still there, but that was a deep tech fund that we created under Cradle, especially for things like yours, rockets. Yours is literally a moonshot because you want to go to the moon. So I said, if you don't invest in moonshots, which have a higher risk of failure than your e-commerce platforms, then we're not really going to have any breakthrough innovation in Malaysia. Because, look, if you read Maria Mazzucato's book about the entrepreneurial state, she explains in one chapter about how this was funded by the government and not by Apple. She explains how every major component in your smartphone today, your Apple iPhone today, from the touchscreen to Siri, to the technology that allows you to use this as a computer in your pocket, was developed by grants from the US government to NASA, to the Defense Research DARPA Agency. So the point here is that without government investment in deep tech, this would not have happened. Some of the technology here was invested in the 1960s because they wanted to send a man on the moon in America, and it ended up in an iPhone. So the point is here, and I said this to Science Minister, I said, if you don't invest in deep tech today, not all the money because it's high risk, then we're not going to see the breakthrough later. Because I'm sure if you go to the private funding, the VC and all that, they won't touch you. They won't touch you. Only government touches deep tech, because government, we don't have to report to our investors. I mean, taxpayers we do have to, but not like VCs. So I'm sorry that you can't get support, but when I was around, I made sure that there was provision for deep tech. Things that we do, robotics, advanced materials, things that are not easily monetizable, but who knows, if I take a bet on you, then maybe in 10 years' time, the technology that you develop is an integral part of our satellite technology in 10 years' time. And the last one from Abdul about syntax and talking about GEG. So just very quickly, GEG, when I was Minister of Education, but I'm not manifesting anything, sorry. When I was Minister of Health, I wanted to bring a law in Parliament to make sure that it was illegal to sell cigarettes to anyone born after January 2007. Cigarette, vape, whatever. It's a law that's been passed in the UK. It's a law that New Zealand passed, but because of the change in government, they repealed. So it's something that's been done in other places to make sure that we shut the door for you. So you guys are all born after 2007, right? Anyway, whoever born after 2007 cannot buy cigarettes anymore. That means the age continues to go up. Yeah? That means you have a you shut the door once and for all on the generation. Yeah, some lawyers came and said, oh, this is fundamentally against freedom of choice, liberty, personal liberty. This is against equality of the law and all that kind of stuff. I said, you don't have the freedom to injure yourself. You don't have the fundamental freedom to injure yourself. And you don't have the fundamental freedom to burden the state with your disease treatment later. And I tried to do it, but I didn't have time. Parliament dissolved. New government came in, they dropped the provision. But coming back to your question, syntax, very simple. I remember I went to Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance, I said I want to do GEG. What is GEG? After 2007, nobody can buy cigarettes. Born after 2007, they're like, hey, tak boleh. I said, why? Because we're going to lose the tax from cigarettes. Cigarette excise duty, syntax. We're going to lose. Luckily, I knew that they were going to ask the questions because one of the modules at Harvard was how to talk to your finance minister. No, literally, because they invited 20 health ministers from around the world about how to become better health ministers, and one of the modules was how to talk to your finance minister. So I already knew, okay, I know how to talk to this guy. Because the finance minister only talks about dollars and cents. He doesn't care about, cancer, all that kind of stuff. Don't quote me. I'm sure he does. So I have to monetize the disease for him or her. In this case, it was a him. So they said, cannot, because we're going to lose money, lose government revenue. So I said, I know you take 5 billion every year, right, from cigarette sales. They're like, oh yeah, how do you know? I said, okay, I'm not stupid. And then, so I said, 5 billion every year, okay. I said, first of all, you're not going to lose 5 billion this year, because only those born after 2007 cannot buy cigarettes. So it goes down gradually. The tax goes down gradually. It doesn't mean this year this year you lose 5 billion. Over time you lose 5 billion. There's still 30, 40 years of people who are smoking that can smoke until they die. Yeah? So those people still continue to pay taxes. But I said, that's one. Secondly, because the finance minister only knows dollars and cents, I said 8 billion. And they're like, what's 8 billion? I said 8 billion is what you, finance minister, pays me, health minister, to spend to treat people with lung cancer, to treat people with cardiovascular disease, to treat people with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung disease. 8 billion we get a year. And then the room went quiet. So in the end, they supported us. The Ministry of Finance supported. Because I said, you cannot look at the direct costs only. You have to look at indirect costs. And that's how much you spend in your private hospitals treating disease that most likely were caused by smoking. So that they understood that. So I hope that it comes back. The government, this present government, passed the law without that part. I want it to come back because that's what we talk about, Prof. Anwar, the transformational, consequential leadership. You do something that has an effect for generations. About the question about whether I want to go back to politics or not. I think about this a lot. I'm having the time of my life right now because I don't have to be in politics. I enjoy what I'm doing. I created this podcast for nothing. It's a business now. We employ people. I go on radio. I dance on TikTok. I have absolutely zero personal dignity left because I do these kind of things. But I'm enjoying. When I was Minister of Health, I had mental health issues. Because all of you complain to me every day about COVID. You know, I don't know really, it's not a joke. I had mental health issues after some people don't know. My blood pressure was off the roof, I was overweight, I was, you know, suffering from, I don't know, PTSD. Now I'm flourishing, man. So, do I want to go back to politics? I don't know, because, I mean, personally, I'm in a better place. Family-wise, I have time to spend with my family and people that I care about. I don't have to worry too much about political life. But, you know, and I say this with great humility, And I also say this because ambition is free. I really want to be Prime Minister of this country. So,
Thank you, Chief. I think we've come to the end of our special lecture today. So it has been a very wonderful session. It's been very sincere talk and what we hear from Mr. KJ. Thank you very much again to our special guest, Mr. KJ, and thank you to everyone for your participation. And now I will go back to Ms. Ida.
I would like to say to all our honorable guests, thank you to Mr. Khairy, Jamaluddin, as well as Dr. Tan for moderating the event. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the end of our event. Thank you all for joining this insightful lecture with hopefully newfound knowledge and a better understanding of Malaysia as well as where it's headed. With that, have a good day, everyone.
Yeah.